Hi, everyone. I'm Richard Sher, and it's time to square off. Let's welcome this week's panel, Pastor Shannon Wright, Square Off's Professor Emeritus, Professor Rick Vatz, plus two of Baltimore, Maryland's most outstanding attorneys, Tom Minkin and Chris Kennedy. And all of you watching, welcome back. Guilty. Former Baltimore City State's Attorney, 44-year-old Marilyn Mosby, was found guilty of one count of mortgage fraud, finding she gave a false statement on a loan application to buy one of her vacation homes in Florida. Mosby was found not guilty of a second count of mortgage fraud. She faces up to 40 years in federal prison for the mortgage fraud conviction and for the May 2023 perjury conviction for lying in order to withdraw $90,000 from a retirement account. Sentencing is set for May 23rd, but usually sentences, it says, Tom, you know, would be much lower. Shannon, what do you think about this?
So I think that nobody's perfect and people do things and make mistakes. But when you work in the legal field, as an elected official, you're held to a higher standard, and the I didn't know excuse doesn't work at all.
Tom, I mentioned you there because you're one of our great legal minds. What do you think?
I wouldn't go that far, Richard, but let me say this. I do have several opinions on this. I mean, this woman came out of nowhere to become the state's attorney, beating Greg Bernstein, who was a terrific state's attorney. She made all sorts of promises that crime was going to be reduced and the city would have a better standard of living. And of course, she accomplished none of that. To me, she spent 8 years basically self-aggrandizing, beginning with the indictment of the 6 police officers involved in the Freddie Gray scenario, all of whom won their cases. Sadly, they had to pay for their defenses themselves, and that was quite a traumatic event for them. And while that was going on, she was running around the country like some sort of celebrity, being feted by a number of organizations about her accomplishments.
Let me move on, Tommy. I want to make sure we're brief today because we have a lot to cover. Professor Vatz, briefly, what's your reaction?
She was an indolent, non-prosecuting state's attorney. She contributed to Baltimore's rampant homicide and general crime explosion. She was voted out by the very good Ivan Bates. But having said all of that, I would not like to see her go to jail. She has 2 kids. I think she should be humiliated, perhaps disbarred, but I do not think that she should. I don't think she should serve time.
Chris.
Shannon made an excellent point about her being a lawyer. That's actually an aggravating circumstance that Judge Grigsby will utilize at the sentencing, in addition to whether she determines whether she lied under oath and a few other circumstances. A bar proceeding has already begun by Bar Counsel against her. And in terms of the convictions, the prior perjury conviction and the 1 count of the mortgage fraud conviction, my sense is those sentences will run concurrently, meaning on top of each other versus one after the other. And doing the math on this, my sense is that the sentencing will be on the low end of 2 to 3 years and on the high end of 4 to 5 years. And
really?
I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up at the same minimum security facility in Aliceville, Alabama, where Catherine Pugh went to serve her time.
Tom, you thinking about what?
I don't disagree with that. I think on both counts, Chris laid it out very well. The fact of the matter is that she has been humiliated, and I don't think there's much to be gained by giving her a significant sentence. uh, because she's been thoroughly humiliated. I can't imagine that she's not going to be disbarred, given the gravity of these convictions. But to put her away for any kind of a long period of time, really, I don't think it's warranted.
All right, I want to mention that Marilyn Mosby testified that she did not intentionally make any false statements and that she signed the loan applications in good faith. The trial included emotional testimony from both Marilyn Mosby and her ex-husband, Baltimore City Council President Nick Mosby. He said he lied to his ex about their outstanding federal tax debt because he was so embarrassed.
Yeah, this was a couple that was made in heaven. I mean, they are both very bright. They're both very conniving, and neither should be in public service again. And I understand he's going to run again, and I think it's appalling. And again, I do not think that jail is the appropriate sentence. I think that very severe financial penalties would do the trick. And I don't think they should be serving time, even though they are truly a terrible, terrible example for children. They're a terrible example for politicians, and they are really ignominious in their accomplishments and work.
Really?
Richard, one other thing, Richard, if I may.
Sure.
You know, Pugh was sentenced to 3 years, but with good behavior, she got out after 2. So if Mosby goes and does what she's supposed to do, she probably could get out early as well. But I think it's a clean verdict. I think Judge Grigsby certainly pre-trial went out of her way to be accommodating by moving the venue to Greenbelt at Mosby's request, at severing the 2 cases apart, which really should have been one trial, and also giving 3 postponements. Now, Tom Minkin's been practicing law for more than half a century. I'm sure he's never seen a federal court case that's been postponed 3 times, or maybe he has, but I've never seen it. So everything that could have been done to give her the benefit of the doubt to get a clean verdict, certainly from a pretrial standpoint, is there. And I have not heard of anything during the coverage during the trial that would rise to the level of plain error. So the verdict's going to stand.
We're talking
Can I
Shannon.
add one more thing?
Wait, Shannon, I'm going to ask you a question. You can make your comment. That would be perfectly fine. But there's been conversation that had Marilyn Mosby not asked for a change of venue, that had she been in Baltimore, where certainly people on the jury, some of them would have been fond of her or whatever, at least she'd have had some kind of a relationship with Baltimoreans instead of strangers in Greenbelt. What do you think about that, Shannon?
I think she would have stood a much better chance had she kept it in Baltimore City. For better or worse, Baltimore has a tradition and a history of politicians that break the law. And I think that, well, you know what, I'm not even going to try and be politically correct or diplomatic. I think the fact that she allowed for a revolving door between prosecution and conviction and folks just getting right back out, but when they've done something they shouldn't have, she would have stood a better chance, because they would have said, oh, she let my cousin out. She let this one out. She'd have stood a better chance.
Let me ask you just a general question. What do you think is the purpose of incarcerating a non-violent individual such as she?
Well, the Aliceville facility is what's commonly known as Club Fed. Okay. I mean, they've got volleyball, TV, there's a lot of benefits. But if you don't incarcerate someone for doing this, you're sending a message that she's above the law. And there's a guy with an orange face who feels the same way, and he needs to be in jail as well. But we'll be talking about him shortly. And the last thing about moving it to Greenbelt, Richard, if it had stayed in Baltimore, and Tom knows this, the entire northern horizontal half of Maryland is equally represented on the jury pool, meaning the potential jurors to be picked from Baltimore City would be the same number as the potential jurors to be picked from Garrett County. Okay, so she would have to draw from all of northern Maryland for a jury pool in if it had been the Northern Division, but she didn't know that actually, because she's never
Right.
tried a jury trial in her.
But
She's
Chris-
never tried a jury trial in her life. She thought that all the jurors would be coming from Baltimore City.
But Chris, the strategy is immaterial to the verdict. In other words, if she gets a different verdict, that's one thing. But what I'm asking is, and I have this general view about nonviolent crime, she can be punished financially as severely as you wish. I don't see a purpose in incarcerating the mother of two for 2, 3, 4 years. What is the purpose of it? Again, it's not a violent crime. I have no respect for her or her husband whatsoever, but I don't see any purpose in incarcerating her except to create misery for 2 children and to create misery for them. But you can create the kind of misery she deserves, which is financial misery.
Well,
I
then the message
disagree.
that if you go adopt
Oh.
2 children before you commit a crime, that you won't have to serve time. So listen, I'm sorry that there's 2 young kids, but that's immaterial here.
Tom,
Yes.
what were you saying?
Well, had she stayed in Baltimore, I think there's probably a better than average chance, given that she certainly has a number of fans in Baltimore. There probably would have been a better likelihood of some Baltimoreans being on the jury. And of course, in Maryland, the verdicts have to be unanimous. So what would have benefited her the most would have been a hung jury, which I think would have been a lot more likely in Baltimore City than in Greenbelt.
I want to just say something and we're going to move on. And that is, Marilyn Mosley made a decision, as somebody referred to a moment ago, to stop prosecuting certain low-level crimes. Her successor, now State's Attorney Ivan Bates, has reversed this controversial policy. Now we have to talk about Biden versus Trump. We'll do that. But first, folks, it's my pleasure to once again welcome the award-winning voice of Square Off, Howard Mallinson. Go ahead, Howard.
I want to show everybody my awards. I'm sure you've seen some of the Barry Glazer TV commercials. They're different. They get your attention. They also get results. So that's important. And that's why Barry Glazer and his team, including an in-house doctor, make no apologies for getting every penny they can from the insurance companies. So when it comes to personal injury or medical malpractice, please, there's only one choice, Barry Glazer at 410-547-8568. And
Right.
Barry is now working with nursing home neglect. So if you've had a problem with a family member or a friend or somebody you think has had a problem in a nursing home, Barry is also your guy.
Absolutely.
There's also a lot of diners in Baltimore, and the most famous of them all are the Double T diners, TT, totally terrific. You're sure to find the best breakfast, lunch, or dinner from the Double T diners' phenomenal menu. There's Double T locations in Route 40, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Laurel, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. Plus, try by the docks in Middle River for their Monday night lobster specials. They're all in the Double T family. Now back to you, Richard.
All right, Howie, excellent, excellent, excellent. Also breaking this past week, a ruling from a federal appeals court that former President Donald Trump is not immune for alleged crimes he committed during his presidency to reverse the 2020 election results. So he is not immune. What are your thoughts? Who wants to speak out on that? Go ahead,
First of all,
Chris.
the question now is, will this case be taken up by the Supreme Court? And the Supreme Court, of course, has a choice in what cases they review. Frankly, I think given that they are totally packed with Trump appointees, they would be very wise from the standpoint of their reputation not to take the case. I think the Federal Court of Appeals wrote this scathing opinion against Trump, and I think there's really not much more to say if one is being objective.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, Tom's right about that. It's one of the most incredible appellate opinions I've ever read, and it was airtight and it was per curiam, meaning it was unanimous, which is a big deal for a federal appeals court to be unanimous. And that makes it very hard for the Supreme Court to want to invade a unanimous per curiam opinion or to change it, especially on something that is pretty self-evident. Trump and his lawyer were literally arguing that, and the guy agreed at oral argument, his lawyer, that if Trump ordered SEAL Team 6 to kill his political opponent, the only way Trump could be prosecuted for a criminal case after he leaves office is if he were first indicted by the House of Representatives and convicted by the US Senate. Absent both of those things happening, you can't prosecute Trump after he leaves office for ordering a hit on his political opponent by SEAL Team 6. Now, that is one of the most absurd things I've ever seen a lawyer say at an appellate argument, but he said it. And the DC Appeals Court, which is widely considered the second most powerful court in the country and is draws most of the Supreme Court justices come from that court, including Roberts and others, and Thomas. They and Kavanaugh, they are not going to disturb this thing. They may take it up for cert, but it has to be four of them, and I'm sure it would be Thomas and Alito. The question is whether two of the three Trump appointees would also vote yes. I don't think they will. Roberts won't, but it'll come down to Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Coney Barrett. If two of those three vote to take cert, I don't think they will.
Here's something
I agree.
from that court, from the court ruling, quote, "For the purpose of this criminal case, former President Donald Trump has become Citizen Trump with all of the defenses of any other criminal defendant, but any executive immunity that may have protected him while he served as president no longer protects this prosecution." Who was speaking?
Well, I think that sentence really says it all. This situation is really appalling, and it's become almost a national joke, and it's a shame because you're talking about the most important political position in the land, and to have it disgraced like this is terrible.
Yeah, they really are frivolous arguments, Richard, and he's just trying to run out the clock, and the Supreme Court knows that. And how horrible would it be if he ran out the clock and was not convicted on any of these cases and then became president again and not only dismissed all these cases, but then exacted revenge. He is, as many have said, the biggest existential threat to global democracy of any human who has lived in our lifetime. And that's a true statement. He is, in his mind, a king. He's an autocrat. He admires the other autocrats around the world, in Russia, China, Hungary, Turkey, North Korea. He wants to be one of those autocrats. And this case, in my opinion, the DC Circuit case, is our last best chance to keep him out of the White House.
Let me just say a couple things. First of all, I have no sympathy for Donald Trump. I wrote an article yesterday in the Baltimore Sun about the fact that he, in fact, stands a good chance of blowing the presidency because he revulses conservative centrists. I'm a long time conservative, and to have a campaign in which you call the very impressive Nikki Haley a bird brain, and he says and also the retributive nature where he says I don't get angry, I get even. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Trump probably should be prosecuted. But let me say this whole business of, and I have to bring in the Joe Biden business, where Robert Hur made a statement with respect to Joe Biden, saying that his memory may be faulty, he's well-meaning, he's elderly, so we're not going to prosecute him. I think this is the most significant thing that has happened in this election period. I think that Joe Biden, who gets angry when he hears this and says, "I know what the hell I'm doing." He says that there's going to be no prosecution on him because He disclosed classified material. And in that statement, in his anger, he confuses El Sisi with the president of Mexico, Obrador. And it looks like a movie in which somebody's been accused of incompetence, and they speak out and they iterate points that demonstrate their incompetence point after point after point. I don't think he's going to be the nominee. And the irony of all of this, by the way, is that if the Democrats replace Joe Biden as the nominee and don't replace him with his vice president and replace him with a good candidate, maybe Klobuchar, there are a number of good candidates in the Democratic Party, I think that is going to be the end for Republicans, because I don't think Trump can win an election against a legitimate Democrat. Against the
Shannon, what do you think
Well-
about what you said?
So I'm not a professor and I'm not a lawyer. So as a regular old everyday citizen, when I hear that as president, you have immunity on things that now you don't, that means if you're an elected official and you do something that you have immunity for, it's a very strange gray area. The fact that you have it and then you don't. That's number one. Number two, I think, yes, there's some political gamesmanship for him to try and run out the clock, win the nomination, and hope to get back in the White House to be able to make some of these charges go away. But I think that when you look at all the efforts that are being made to keep this man off the ballot, and the arguments being made that that in itself smacks against people's constitutional right to vote for who they want to vote for, I think we're in a very bad area as a country, period.
Shannon, are you wearing a microphone or is it part of your setup there? Because you're a little muddy.
No,
You're a little muddy today. If you could just back up a hair, I think it might improve. Let me hear you. Say something.
is that better?
A little bit. Okay.
Richard,
Well, go ahead, Chris.
yeah, real quick. Professor Vatz always balancing both sides of every issue like a good professor would. I'm sure Rick has seen the highlight reel of Donald Trump's verbal gaffes over the past several months, including not once, not twice, but on 3 separate days, calling Nikki Haley the Speaker of the House. But people don't get as hot and bothered about that as Joe Biden mistaking the president of Mexico with a person from Gaza, when there are 2 major international crises that he's juggling at the same time. But that having been said, Trump is somebody who it's just an existential threat, as I've said, and I don't know how else we can save our democracy other than to do something to prevent him from getting back the White House. It's just that
isn't your job. That is the public's job through voting. And so I think that Trump is just unacceptable as president. But that doesn't mean I think he should be legally outlawed from running for president. He hasn't been convicted of anything.
I didn't say that. I mean, if he thinks he can do his job from the inside of a federal penitentiary, in Hagerstown, good luck to him with that, because that's, I think, the only way to stop him from doing this. I really mean that, Rick.
But that's your premise, that should be our goal, to stop him from running. That is not our job. He has not been convicted of anything. And I don't think it's right to stop the Republicans from having him as a candidate. And I say this as a person who reviles Trump. But I don't think that gives us the right to seek out methods which will prevent him from running for president without him being convicted of anything.
But if he's guilty of 91 felonies, what difference does it make if he's running for mayor or president of mayor of some city? If you're guilty, you should be prosecuted for it. And if you're not, because you're running for president, then you're above the law. And we can't allow that to happen either. You know that.
I think we're using semantics here. He hasn't been convicted, so you're stopping a private citizen from doing something. That's not right. It's not.
Sit back just like that, Shannon. Your audio is much better. Go ahead, Tom Minkin.
As a coda to what's been said here, people forget the United States was governed by the sainted Ronald Reagan, who in the second term was actively burdened by Alzheimer's. So, you know, when it comes to a person's mental ability to do it, I think Joe Biden is on top of those people and can do the job easily.
I just factually disagree with you. I don't think his manifest Alzheimer's became evident until after his presidency. So we're just going to have to disagree with that.
Well,
That's
Rick,
not correct,
do you
Rick.
think that Trump has Alzheimer's, Rick?
No,
You don't?
no, I
How
don't.
could even though his highlight reel shows him thinking that Nikki Haley was the Speaker of the House, and he did it on 3 separate days?
You have me in the position of defending him, and I can't stand him. But I'm telling you that his errors fall into the category of normal errors that people make under pressure under the spotlight, and Joe Biden's do not. That doesn't mean I think he should be. I think he'd be a good candidate. I think he's the ruination of the country as well as.
All right, Rick, you said that. Let's go to Howard Mallison, and then we'll talk about Lamar for a couple of minutes. Hal?
Thank you, Rich. You know, I don't know where you're watching the football game this weekend, but, you know, if you really want to watch it and enjoy a great crab cake, how about going to Pappas? With their big screens everywhere in their sports bars, it's a great place to watch the Super Bowl and also enjoy their famous fab cake, as Richard calls it, which is Oprah's favorite. It's one of the many delicious choices on the Pappas menu, and Pappas ships their crab cakes all over the country. So with 4 locations, including their newest sports bar and restaurant in Bel Air, make it your business to be at Pappas this weekend. And Leading Edge Auto Body and Mechanical Repair want you to know that the insurance companies cannot tell you where to take your car. Richard and his family have been taking their cars to Leading Edge for service for years. They work on all makes and models. They offer free pickup anywhere in the Baltimore area. So call Leading Edge at 410-433-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. Now back to you, Richard.
They are the best. I stand by it. They're just Jeff Siegel and his staff, fabulous. Give them a try. You won't be disappointed, nor will you be disappointed to learn that 27-year-old Lamar Jackson, despite the championship loss, has been made the NFL's most valuable player for the second year in a row. And he is just unbelievable. This happened in Las Vegas the other night. What are your thoughts about Lamar? Go ahead, Tom, you're up.
Well, he certainly is a terrific football player. There's no question about that. But to be frank, I think there's a question as to his level of maturity because of this repetitious failure to win games enough to get us, no pun intended, over the goal line. And I think that I'm frankly surprised that he was unanimously awarded the most valuable player. I mean, certainly he's terrific, but results count. And that's the problem.
There was one negative against him. It wasn't unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Rick Vatz.
Well, let me just say that I wrote on my Facebook page, which means that all the world knows it, that if the Ravens lost the game to the Chiefs, it would be because they were so spooked by the Chiefs and the charisma of Mahomes. I think Mahomes is the most valuable player. I think they should. Tell me, why do they wait? Why don't they wait to vote until after the championship game or even after the Super Bowl? Why would they vote before them? Which demonstrates in a situation where you have Mahomes against Lamar, who's really the most valuable player. I mean, it's just the peculiar rules that mean that you vote the most valuable player who's not the most valuable player.
Go ahead, Chris.
That's a great point, Rick. I think it should be voted the day after the regular season ends because Lamar is all fall and all December, but when January rolls around, it's a different Lamar. I mean, and I was watching him very closely during the Chiefs game, and he just did not look focused. Okay, he has that same focus that he would during an August preseason game. And you just can't have that. And the decisions that he makes at these clutch times are really devastating, especially that final interception where he knowingly threw into triple coverage. That is amazing. But beyond Lamar, it was the most poorly disciplined performance by a John Harbaugh team that I'd seen in many years, with all those silly penalties and mistakes about not protecting the ball when you're trying to hold the ball over the goal line, and fumbles and so forth. It is just so un-Harbaugh like to see that out of a Ravens team. But you know, most of them are coming back next year, so they'll have another shot at it. But I finally do agree, Mahomes is by far the MVP, in my opinion.
Shannon, final word on this.
Mahomes, honestly, I think there were better choices. One, for outcomes. Two, level of maturity. I would absolutely say Mahomes would have been a better choice, and the timing of when they voted.
We got to say goodbye. We want to congratulate former Super Bowl quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, the amazing Joe Flacco, who just won Comeback Player of the Year. Congratulations, Joe. And he's waiting to be signed by some team, if not the Browns. Hey, good show. Thank you all so much. You tell your friends. They can find us at squareoff.net. Squareoff.net. And we will see you again next week. Thank you to you, Tom Minkin, Chris Kennedy, Shannon Wright, and Rick Vatz, who says, do not send them to jail. See you next time. And once again, we square off. Have a great week. Bye-bye, everybody.